they're just taking this entire branch and like grabbing all of the leaves off of it. And they're the loudest eaters you would ever imagine. And normally that would drive me crazy. Like if I'm at a table with someone and, I'm next to a loud eater, I cannot handle it. But with a Sumatran rhino, it's the most endearing thing, ever. They're just chomping and they're so loud.
That voice you just heard was Martha Parker, and this is Dragonfly Conversations. Through this podcast, we highlight everyday people making a real difference in conservation and education. I'm Kevin Madison, and through my work with Project Dragonfly, I get to share their stories. Today, Martha teaches us that saving a species is as much about managing human partnerships as it is about biology. She is a conservation leader who coordinates global grants for the International Rhino Foundation and champions human-centered design in wildlife programs. We talk about the prehistoric armor of the greater one-horned rhino, the secret lives of the hairy Sumatran rhino, and why nature is far more resilient than we often give it credit for. All right, Martha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's been a while. We connected on the Galapagos Earth Expeditions program way back, and then we recently saw each other at Tampa AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums meeting. But it's just so fun to catch up and hear about your work with the International Rhino Foundation. So I want to start with this Keep the Five Alive initiative from IRF. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of the 5 rhino species, how they're doing, and the general state of the species, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 5 current living rhino species. And IRF is the only organization that works on protecting all 5. Sort of state of the rhino, it depends on the species. Some are okay, some are more critically endangered than the others. So the greater one-horn rhino in India and Nepal is doing pretty well. They came back from about 100 at their lowest to more than 4,100 now and continue to grow with very, very low poaching, if not no poaching in some areas. The Indonesian species, Javan and Sumatran rhinos, both critically endangered, less than 50 individuals in each species. So 2 of the most critically endangered mammals, certainly on the planet. And then in Africa, the rhinos that most people are familiar with, some people don't even know that they're Asian rhinos, but the 2 African species, black and white, both doing okay. The black rhinos, as species, slowly increasing in population, but still fairly small, but we do see progress. And white rhino species, the most numerous of all the rhinos, but also the most heavily poached. So, we see success across Africa, but still poaching remains the biggest threat to all rhinos, but certainly the African species.
Got it. Yeah, I was going to ask about poaching, and it is exciting. You said that the first one you mentioned, the greater one-horned, is that right?
Correct.
That the poaching has become less of an issue for that one. And it's amazing that you're saying they're in good shape and they've gone from, up to 4,100. And you think that's like the village I live in, right, in terms of human population. So it's still, any sort of disease, any sort of element could still be a problem for these. I mean, are there other things besides poaching that you're seeing with genetic bottlenecks or, like I said, disease or other issues that rhinos are facing?
Yeah, pretty much, throw any conservation threat at the wall and you'll probably find a way to connect it to rhinos, unfortunately. But yeah, like in India and Nepal, certainly the changes in human population, habitat is a growing problem. Rhinos need a lot of space. So, and they do really well when they have a ton of space and, other rhinos around and plenty of food. So any time that space and food is limited, that's going to be a problem for them. Certainly that's a problem in Indonesia and across Africa as well. So habitat fragmentation, changes to their habitat. So in India and Nepal, we do a lot of work on invasive plant species. So just removing invasive plants that are taking over grasslands, because the greater one-horns are a grassland species. So a lot of habitat management work done there just to to restore the grasslands that they need. And we're doing similar work in Indonesia, but it's not grasslands, it's forest. Both Javan and Sumatran rhinos love to live in dense forests. They're very, very solitary, shy species. So doing some work to replant there. And then, of course, with those two species, Javan and Sumatran rhinos, their populations are so, so low that, genetic bottlenecks, huge problem. They cannot find each other. The Sumatran rhinos, very hard for them to find each other in the wild to breed because the populations are so small and fragmented. We do see, even though the Javan rhino population is very small, we do see evidence of breeding in the wild. With that population, they're all in one national park, which is never what you want with one single species in one place because it could be a tsunami, disease, you name it. So a lot of different threats, but certainly poaching is still the top threat to all species.
Right. And with them finding their mates and being so secretive and shy, I love that description of it's so cute to think of this rhino, this massive animal with those characteristics. But do you ever help them find a mate? Like, is there any, matchmaking service for them?
We do. Yes, we do pretty much exactly that with Sumatran rhinos. So we helped establish the Sumatran Rhino Sanctuary in the 90s with our local partners in Indonesia. So it is a semi-wild captive breeding facility in southern Sumatra. And there are 10 rhinos there now. Actually, one from Cincinnati Zoo. I don't know if you saw Hairpan when he was in the United States, but there were Sumatran rhinos in the US, in US zoos. And now all Sumatran rhinos are in Indonesia. So 10 at this breeding center. And we've had 3 calves in the last 3 years, I think, if that's correct. And so we're actually building a new structure there so that we can accommodate more rhinos. So basically, we have 10 rhinos there. We would like to bring more in from the wild because of genetic issues. We need to have some more rhinos there for breeding, and the idea is that they will go back into the wild when they can. But yes, we are bringing them in when feasible because they cannot find each other to breed naturally. And Sumatran rhinos specifically, we know, and with other species too, when the females are not breeding, at whatever intervals or frequently enough, they start to develop these like reproductive issues. So cysts, ovarian cysts, and different things. So it's sort of this like vicious cycle of when they can't find each other, and then the longer they go without breeding, then they start to develop these other issues that then when they do find each other, it makes it even more difficult for them to breed or to carry a calf all the way through birth and so on.
And it's got to be so expensive to, move a rhino from the Cincinnati Zoo or from any zoo facility into the wild,
Mhm.
and to also make sure that they're, you know, able to survive in the wild, like that they kind of, I don't know if you do like a partial release where it's like they're in a kind of an area where you can do some supplemental feeding and monitor their health, and then like slowly by slowly they kind of learn how to be a wild rhino. Is that something you all are looking into?
Yeah, so right now they're all in these forest enclosures. So they're fully enclosed at the Sumatran Rhino Sanctuary, those 10 rhinos. It's like a big pizza, each ring, and we have two
Mm.
rings. We're building a third. So a big pizza with different slices, and each rhino gets 2 slices of that pizza. And basically every 6 months they rotate. They're fenced off, but in a huge space that is their natural habitat. So they go off and they forage on their own, but they're protected. And every 6 months they rotate so that one slice of the pizza can regenerate growth
My
and
goodness.
browse, and then they can feed on the next one and then move them around. And we have a honeymoon paddock that we can bring 2 rhinos together to breed. So it is all enclosed, but it's in the national park in their natural habitat.
But your role, you're not like out there in the field too often with these, I don't think, because you're involved with grants writing and collaborations and partnerships. So what's that like for you and your skills to be leveraging that to make a difference for these rhinos?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I can be of the most support, especially for an international conservation effort. We have Indonesian staff on the ground, for that example specifically, and teams that we partner with that know all the different aspects of rhino conservation, biology, husbandry, government politics, all the things. And that's not the way that I can best support conservation in Indonesia. The way I can best support it is sort of all the project management and the fundraising and the growing partnerships in order to support the work on the ground. So I feel great about my role because I think that's where my skills best align. Working for a small nonprofit, you end up doing a little bit of everything, grant writing and fundraising. But then I also oversee all of the grants that we give out. We're one of these organizations where we're receiving funding and then we're also sending funding out to all these different organizations and partners that we work with across Africa and Asia. So I oversee all of that in addition to all the partnerships that, enable us to do this work, both receiving funding and giving funding. So it's it's a lot it's a lot of the people work. I get to see rhinos every now and then, which is great, and I love that, but most of my work is dealing with humans, which funny enough, I actually love. So, I got into it for the wildlife. That was the hook, but the people part is really where I feel most connected.
I mean, I think in our minds, being out there in the field and in the Jeep and going and seeing the rhinos and the paddocks and studying it's so romantic and exciting. But the reality is that conservation really needs people that can write and make connections and make the case for rhinos and help manage these programs. So how do you, I mean, I feel like the one of the hard things in likely in your position is that there's so many worthy conservation causes. I mean, how do you approach donors and avoid like donor fatigue with being asked to like support so many different things?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially in like today's world, it's
Mm.
like not only are there so many different things just in the conservation world, but there are just so many needs in the world. So we're really lucky. We have a dedicated, small compared to some other nonprofits, but a very dedicated sort of pool of rhino advocates, supporters, and they step up time and time again to help rhinos. So, that's sort of like a niche group of people that really, really love rhinos. But I think the way that we're able to sort of reach new audiences and new supporters and sort of tell the story of rhinos is how much the rhinos actually really impact all these other species, in terms of what they do for seed dispersal and what they do for just generally like habitat management, similar to like an elephant, not to the level of elephants, but similar in terms of how they how they really help shape and transform the areas where they live to the benefit of all these other species. And so I think when we can tell that story of how rhinos are not only like just super cool animals in and of themselves, but also how they play this bigger role in the landscape, then that invites other people into the conversation that aren't maybe big rhino lovers, but they're like, okay, I can see how this species plays a role in the larger ecosystem. And we certainly are seeing funders, bigger foundations looking at sort of this landscape level, not just individual species, support.
Right. Are they considered ecosystem engineers? And, I think of elephants, like you alluded to, clearing brush and
Mhm.
helping to maintain savanna ecosystems or even like gaps in the forest if it's forest elephants. I mean, are rhinos doing a similar thing there?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's amazing what they do. You think about like the wallows and things that they create and help form, especially in Indonesia and all these other species that benefit from it. And yeah, the paths that they clear, and I think it's fair to give them that accolade.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, they're so big, just
Yeah.
just they're, moving through.
Mhm.
So I don't remember if we talked much about Jurassic Park when we in Galapagos all those years ago, but I don't know if you're a fan.
Yes.
I okay. It seems like you should be.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, seeing the giant tortoises when we were in the Galapagos, I remember thinking this is about as close to being around a dinosaur in terms of just their size and hearing them breathe, just the size of this animal. I think rhinos, even though they're a mammal and taxonomically not super close to dinosaurs, there's just something about them, their size and such that sort of harkens to dinosaurs and Jurassic Park. I mean, do you sometimes feel like you're living in a little piece of that sort of fictional world through your work?
I mean, yeah, I think like working with wildlife definitely feels like that a lot of times. You're like, these animals are amazing. Am I in a movie or is this real life? And I think I probably felt that the most seeing greater one-horned rhinos in India because I don't know if you've ever seen them up close at a zoo, but they look prehistoric. I mean, they look like they could be walking around with dinosaurs. They have this armor around, it kind of looks like an armadillo almost, like but rhino sized. Their skin and everything and their horn, the way that particular species looks, and if you can see them up close, it's pretty amazing. It's very sort of similar to dinosaur level. Yeah. And they're huge. I mean, the greater one-horned rhinos are absolutely immense.
All
So,
right, they've just it's now on my bucket list for
yeah.
sure
Yeah.
to try
Gotta
and
go
figure
see
this
one.
out.
Yeah.
So, have you had, I mean, it sounds like you've had experiences, even though your most of your daily job is working from home
Mhm.
and doing office work and
Mhm.
managing all these things, but you've gotten to see a lot of these animals, it sounds like, out in the wild. Is that true? And do you have any experiences that you'd like to share where you really had that sort of like click moment of just like an emotional connection with this species and its plight and also what you're doing to help them?
Yes, I would. Yeah. I'm very fortunate to be able to travel to these places, which of course is incredibly beneficial when you're there with the partners on the ground. I mean, I don't do it all the time. I have young kids at home, and also it doesn't make sense for me to be there all the time. And of course, it's a lot of money. So IRF is really good about thinking about exactly what is the benefit, what is the ROI of you going there? How can you help benefit, the partners on the ground while you're there? I've been to India and I was in Indonesia many years ago now, maybe 4 years ago. Going to the Sumatran Rhino Sanctuary was very special because I actually don't know if I've ever been around a species that is that critically endangered. I think you just sort of like, when you see one of these animals, or in that case, you get to see 10 because they're all there in one facility. I mean, basically, I don't think I'll ever see this species in the wild. They're so secretive. They're so shy and there are so few that this was sort of like, oh my gosh, this is, I'm seeing one of these animals and there may be, 45 others in the entire world. And they're just a really unique rhino species. They're quite small. They're the smallest of all the rhinos. They're hairy. So they often are even like reddish. They just look totally different than other rhinos. And it's like being at a zoo when you're up that close to an animal. It's just a totally different experience. And the thing I'll remember the most about seeing the Sumatran rhinos is the keepers give them additional browse in the morning. And they're just taking this entire branch and like grabbing all of the leaves off of it. And they're the loudest eaters you would ever imagine. And normally that would drive me crazy. Like if I'm at a table with someone and, I'm next to a loud eater, I cannot handle it. But with a Sumatran rhino, it's the most endearing thing, ever. They're just chomping and they're so loud and they're
Yeah, they get a
ripping.
pass for sure.
Yeah,
They get
exactly.
encouragement. You're like, get louder. This is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
adorable.
yeah. Can I get closer to you? Ripping the leaves off this branch. They're just chomping. And then the funny thing is that they actually sing. So you can probably Google this and find some audio recordings or even some video of the Sumatran rhinos, but they sing. They make these incredible noises. And so that's just something I'll never forget and certainly feel very, very privileged to be able to have that experience because I know so many people will never get to see this species like that. Even just saying that out loud, it's like, I feel like, how did I land here and get these amazing opportunities to try and help make sure that people do get to see this species, that people do get to enjoy this incredible animal.
Martha, you've got such an exciting and important role, and along with everyone else, I'm sure working with the IRF, it's to be a part of that. And I'm just curious. I mean, like we think about them, maybe going extinct in our lifetimes. Or when I was growing up, I kind of thought I would be an adult and rhinos would be gone when I was like in high school, and they're not. They're still holding on, which is great, and even some glimmers of hope, like you were mentioning at the start. But if you think like, sometimes I think like, what about 500 years from now, right? Which
Mhm.
seems like, how can this, because even if they raise up, like they're never going to be at very large populations. I don't even know what their historic population estimates were, pre sort of like, going back 20,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or something. I mean, are you filled with hope, or are you more skeptical for the long term for these species?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I'm like, it's like pragmatic hope, maybe. Like, I don't see a future where we have, 100,000 rhinos moving around Indonesia. That's probably not likely given the other needs, like human needs, other species, like that's just not gonna happen.
We think of humans, it's so rare to have a large mammal, a primate, in our case as humans, that has reached this level of 6 to 7 billion,
Billion.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think most of these large animals, I'm not 100% sure on this. It would be interesting to know, what is the historic estimates in Indonesia? Do
I
you
don't
think
know.
they were ever were that number or no?
I don't know off the top of my head. We'll have to do some fact
Mhm.
checking, but certainly like the Javan rhino we know went all the way to the Javan rhino is most closely related, I believe, to the greater one-horn rhino because their population was that far, widespread across Southeast Asia, basically all of Southeast Asia. Their numbers were so much larger than they are now.
Right. Just based on range. That's a
Yeah,
good
just
point.
on
Yeah.
how many different countries and areas where they were found. So I guess I just try and see it as we're not like there isn't a history book that we're, a page in the history books that we're going back to. That's not sort of the goal, is like, what does the future look like? Let's be really realistic about human populations and just how we're changing the landscape and climate change and all of these things. And so, how do we envision a future where we can have these amazing rhinos at whatever level is sustainable and healthy, a thriving population, but also a thriving population of all the other species, including humans that are here? Because, we're not going to go back hundreds or thousands of years where, that sort of idea of what those rhinos and those landscapes once used to be. So I kind of think about what could a future look like where there are rhinos and we have generations who can, potentially see these rhinos, and we have healthy rainforests that are great for the Indonesian species of rhinos and orangs and elephants and all these other animals, but also great for the people living there. And I don't have a number in my head. I don't know what that is, but that's sort of like the goal in my mind of where we're heading in the future. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, and to be able to have future generations hear them sing, as you said, it's like, yeah, it seems so important for them, but also for us. So I want to connect to your Dragonfly journey, your global field program. You are an alum of the program. So what was that like? What do you remember from the program? Has any of it affected you currently? And maybe just share also like what Earth expeditions you went on during your time in the program.
yes, it feels like a lifetime ago. I don't know, like 14 years ago, maybe, if
It
I'm
is a
getting
while, yeah.
my math correct. Yeah. I just feel like it came at such a great, it is such a great program. And it was like came at the right moment in my career when I wanted to further my skills and my network and, further myself and my leadership. And didn't want to leave this amazing job that I had. Like I had, the job that I would always wanted. So to find this program where I could do both and like they were both feeding each other was like, you know, say less. I want to do this program. So yeah, I felt like it came at a really good time. My Earth expeditions trips were Belize, Borneo, and Namibia.
Mm-mm.
But I tried to align, those last two trips with some of the work that my former employer, the Houston Zoo, was doing. So we were working with similar partners in both Namibia and Borneo. So it really did feed each other in terms of like this was a great program for me, and my personal development, but also my professional career and helping the zoo at that time, for me to get that training and education. And I really appreciated that the program supports people in whatever way they need to be supported. If my passion is, plastic reduction or behavior change or, I don't know, habitat management, whatever it is, you can really tailor the program around that. And that just feels great, I think, for a master's program where you're not just sort of like slotted into, okay, you're just going to do this coursework and you're going to learn about these things, which sometimes I think undergrad can feel a bit, sort of programmed for you versus getting a master's. You're in a different point in your career, obviously. And to have that flexibility to build it around what you're passionate about and what supports your career was really, really great.
Yeah, following your interests, right? And
Mhm.
also the focus on community. And I assume, you know, that's changed me personally. I will say, like, really thinking about how we engage with communities and true, openings for people to share their perspectives and kind of trying to bake that into everything we do, right? So important for conservation, right? At this point.
That's, I mean, critical, but not going to succeed without that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay. And I also have been, from your time in the program that we're big into reflection. And so I've got this new segment of the podcast where I ask about these dragonfly reflections. So maybe we can, as we start to wrap up here, if I could just ask you a couple things along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing, Martha, is there a time when you were younger when there was like a spark that made you realize you wanted to get into nature conservation as a career potentially?
I grew up in Western New York, basically as far away from New York City as you can get. And I have to
Mm.
qualify that because people, when they hear New York, they think I grew up in Manhattan, and it couldn't be further from the truth. We had more cows than people in my town. I grew up on 20 acres. Like I was outside all the time, one of those sort of idyllic childhoods where you just come back for dinner, but like your parents don't know where you were, what you did the entire day because you're just like outside. And I have this very vivid memory. I probably was only maybe 8 or something. My mom was digging in an area to like make a new garden bed or to plant some plants. And I was out there helping her, and she inadvertently dug up a nest of bunnies, baby bunnies. I mean, they were tiny, tiny,
Oh,
tiny. Probably, I don't know, maybe like a day or 2 days old. And of course, I'm running over and I'm touching them and I'm picking them up. And I'm like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And my mom was like, don't touch them. Then the mom won't come back. I have no idea if that's true. I don't know that much about bunnies, but so she was basically like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, I think these guys are probably going to die. They're so young. They don't have their mom." And I was like, "No. I mean, like the thought of them dying was like that. That's just not going to happen." And so my sweet mom, she was like, she's always been the most supportive. She helped me call the vet because she knew like I was not going to leave this alone. I was a dog with a bone at this point. And we
mm.
called the local vet in our town, and he basically was like, here's what you can do, but like the chances of you keeping these things alive to then release them back into the wild, very, very slim. Like maybe, if there are 10 bunnies, maybe you'll get like one or two to survive. But he told me what to do, when to feed, what to feed, all the things. So I did it. and followed his directions, to a T. And I was just so committed. And I remember, I think basically like 8 or 9 of them survived out of the 10.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
I'm feeding them with like a tiny little, what do you call it? Like not a
Syringe or
syringe.
something, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
like
Feeding them this.
dropper.
Yeah, like a dropper every couple hours. I don't even remember, but I was so committed. And yeah, like most of them survived. And I think I, released them back to the wild. Who knows? There's probably looking back, it's probably like no one would advise you to do that now. I don't know, whatever diseases I probably introduced into the population, whatever. That moment was the thing that I
Sure.
remember. Like, I've just got to do this in some way with animals. I've got to be involved. And of course, it's changed so much since then, but the like root of wanting to be connected to wildlife, wanting to be connected to nature, helping in whatever way I could, that has remained true. And so it was
Yeah.
bunnies, and now it's just a much, much bigger mammal
Much big.
these days.
Still here. It can be hairy and
Yeah, and pretty cute.
adorable.
Yep. Yep.
Well, kudos to Mama Martha for supporting you in that endeavor. I'm sure it was a lot of work. And, as a parent, you're sometimes stressed. Like, what if these all die? Like, oh my goodness, she's connected. You can go different directions with these things decision wise. So
Totally.
really cool how that affected you. Is there anything, in your work with the International Rhino Foundation or other areas that groups you've worked with where you're just so proud of something you've achieved working with coworkers?
Yeah, I mean it feels silly to like reflect when you still feel so new in your career, which I do feel like I'm still just entering the field, even though I've been doing it for a while now. But I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is some of the work that I did when I was at the Houston Zoo, which was my job prior to coming to IRF, and some of the work we did around behavior change, which is something, and it's not always the best phrase for it, but basically, working at the zoo and getting the zoo to take in this idea of sort of human human-centered design when it comes to programs to reduce all these threats to wildlife. That was just not something that a lot of zoos in the US were doing. We saw Australian zoos doing a great job and some zoos in the UK really thinking about, okay, if we want to reduce, plastic pollution, how do we actually create programs around that where that really takes in, how humans interact with that and what decisions they're making and their behaviors and their needs and the barriers, all these different components that, of course, the social sciences think about all the time, but that the social sciences weren't really like mainstream, I would say, in American zoos as a way of thinking about conservation. And so that was something I was able to, with the team, not me solo at all, but really bring into the conversation about how we were designing programs for our own community in Houston and thinking about how zoos could just really leverage this like component of conservation work that didn't feel like it was a top priority. So was able to sort of bring that into the discussion, got a lot of our staff trained on it, started changing how we implemented programs and design programs. And that was more than 10 years ago. And now you look at like the program of all the different topics and things that people are giving presentations on, having discussions on, and I just see it everywhere. And that's certainly not me. That's the whole industry growing. But to know that I was part of that sort of in the earlier days is very yeah, that makes me feel great to know that we're just
Yeah, for
thinking
sure.
more
That
about the human component of
right.
it.
The human component. Yeah, that's great. And who knows what you'll be thinking in 10, 15 years looking, in the future, looking back to your work with IRF now. So we're just about at time. The last thing, I know you live in Florida now, you've got young kids. Is there anything, I'm just curious if you have any moments in nature in the last week or two, just little moments of reconnection or Seeing something beautiful outside that gave you a little sense of happiness.
Yes. So even though I live in Florida, we just had the last week of probably the coldest temperatures, definitely in the 4 years I've lived here. So we had very, very cold weather for Florida. And so this weekend, I was out in the backyard, in the front yard with my kids, and I've taken out all the grass and I have all native Florida plants that I've planted. Um, and I did not cover any of them. I'll just be really honest. I didn't buy the blankets. I didn't do the things. I'm
Yeah.
just like, these are native Florida plants. We'll see how cold, they can really tolerate. So I was out there sort of like giving and, checking everything out to see what the damage was. And I will tell you from afar, from sort of just like a one lap, I was pretty mortified.
Yeah.
I've spent a ton of time and energy on these gardens. And so to see them from afar, like it looks like everything's dead. Like I would say it looks like 70% of my garden is dead.
Yes. Very sad.
Really devastating. But then I
Yeah.
kind of, spent more time. I really looked at every plant and I just saw like these little tiny sprouts, like little bits of green that really give me a ton of hope that I did not lose an entire garden and that there are all these little parts of different plants that are still alive and that I'm sure come March and April when we get, rain and warmer weather, they're just gonna thrive. This kind of is maybe how I'm feeling about the world right now. Like my
Right.
garden is a little bit of a window into the world where it can look really dark from afar. And then you kind of start peeling back the layers and you're like, wait a minute, there are good things happening all over the place. And it just is a great reminder that nature is super resilient. If we give it a chance, it is incredibly resilient. And I include humans when I say nature. Like we are resilient, species are resilient, the plants in my garden are resilient. I haven't lost everything. Like it will regrow and I will be enjoying all of the pollinators coming to my yard in a few months. So that gave me at first a little bit of fear and sadness, but then upon closer look, just a ton of hope.
Yeah, so true. Love that so much. That is fantastic. I often feel the same in spring with cold snaps and you see the sad daffodils all sort of wilted, falling over, and my wife and friends are like, "Is oh my goodness, is everything done?" And I'm like, well, some of them may, it's true, some might, but you might be surprised. Some may
Mhm.
come back. There is that resilience you're talking about.
Yeah.
So let's keep rooting for that, looking for that, and doing our best. Martha, thank you so much for joining and sharing all your excellent, incredible, inspiring work with the Rhino Foundation and beyond. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for having me and thanks to Project Dragonfly for being part of my journey. It's been a big part and I have loved, you know, doing the program and being part of the alumni network and yeah, just think the world about Project Dragonfly. So thanks for having me.
Hi there, folks. Just one more thing before you head on out. If you have a moment, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear in what ways you are finding this podcast useful, how you listen, what you would like to hear more of, less of, etc. Please feel free to send me any and all feedback, any ideas for guests, etc. to Kevin Madison at my email, which is mattiskc@miamioh.edu. That's spelled MATTESKC @miamioh.edu. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day.